What's up, guys? Welcome to the Walk On Warrior podcast, where we prepare young student athletes for next level success. I am your host, Coach Z, and I'm super excited for our guest today. He has got a wealth of knowledge. He's got a ton of wisdom and insight. He's been coaching for over 20 plus years at every single level you can imagine: professional, Division I, Division II, Division III. And listen, without further ado, Coach Cesar Rivas, welcome to the Walk On Warrior podcast.
Coach Z, appreciate you having me. This is awesome. Love the mission, love the vision. Always love to get together with a fellow San Diegans. So good excuse to chop it up with you and talk a little bit of football recruiting and mentorship.
So I always like to start off these podcasts with something that's more or less an icebreaker. So you've been coaching for 20 plus years. And I'm going down your resume and I'm like, he's coached in San Diego, I think Indiana, Florida, Colorado. Hold on. I think there's a whole plethora of places you've been. Where am I missing out here?
So I've been at one high school, 9 different colleges, and 3 different pro organizations around the country. I've made quite the business of renting U-Hauls, and now I think the pods are the way to go. But no, all joking aside, it's been quite a miraculous just travel experience for a little Mexican kid from South Bay, San Diego, born and raised in Chula Vista. And before there was East Chula Vista down in San Diego, before there was East Lake and Otay Ranch and all those and the east part of Chula Vista, there was just old Chula Vista. That's where I grew up, right behind Castle Park Elementary School, and then we moved and we moved just behind Chula Vista High School. And my dad actually still lives in that house, and my parents still own the little one over by Castle Park Elementary School.
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't understand, like, if we were talking to a young kid that was looking to get into coaching, it's a pretty long, especially if you're wanting to coach at the highest level, or even the university level, however you want to put it. But it's a pretty long road. I mean, you really gotta cut your teeth. You got to spend a lot of time learning X's and O's,
right?
And you really have to put your time into it. And the guys don't understand that going into coaching. They start realizing on the job, they're like, man, I gotta really put some time into learning my position, being a GA, whatever, you know? So talk a little bit about your story, man. So in 20 years and all those different stops, you know, there's a lot of experiences, a lot of things that you've had to go through, but talk a little bit, start with the beginning of your story till where you are currently today.
Okay. Well, let's see. It's been 23 years of coaching ball. I started I graduated at Hilltop High School down in Chula Vista, played my college ball at UC Davis, had an inkling that I was interested in it, but I really wanted to just be a teacher. That's really what I wanted to do. And a good buddy of mine encouraged me to come back to our old high school and coach high school football with him and a couple buddies back in 2000. So I graduated at Davis in 99. And I moved back to San Diego and back to Chula Vista, and we coached ball together at Hilltop High School for about a season. And then I kind of got the itch. I was about to go back to UC Davis and be one of the volunteer assistants, because at that time, Division II football and UC Davis was a Division II non-scholarship school. So I know what it's like to be a walk-on. So when you talk about Walk-On Warrior podcast, I mean, I was one too. Every single one of us at UC Davis back in the day in the 90s and prior to starting scholarships in 99, we were all walk-ons. So I wanted to go back there, and I had this kind of curiosity about it. Maybe I'll give this a shot. Let me check it out. And then right before I did that, a good buddy of ours, I don't know if you know Jorge Munoz. He's kind of all over the record books as a quarterback at Southwestern College. He's a Hilltop grad, South Bay guy. He coaches at the University at Louisiana now. And he's been there between Louisiana and LSU for a while now. But he took an offense coordinator job at a little Division III school out in Indiana, and he was home. And I went to his wedding, and they said, "Hey, we've got this open position on our staff, and it pays a whopping like $480 a month." and you'll have to substitute teach in the off season. And I think we can get you a meal plan, but no dorm room, no rent, no. And I never lived outside of San Diego before, so I said, yeah, let's give this a shot. I'm curious. So I called up my old defense coordinator, head coach at UC Davis, and said, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? And they said, oh, you can always come back here and volunteer. We'll always take volunteers. You should go and check this out halfway around the country. So I did, and that's what kind of spurned the whole starting of this coaching career. So coached at a Division III school out in Indiana at the time, Anderson University. Came back to San Diego, finished my master's. Coached at Southwestern College for a couple seasons, and then started the trek. Moved from Colorado to Nebraska to Tennessee, back to Colorado to the East Coast for a quick cup of coffee, Miami down for a quick cup of coffee, to South Dakota to Green Bay for a quick cup of coffee, and then I finally, the longest tenure I'd had was actually at Azusa Pacific. So we started a family and wanted to kind of be a little bit more secure and not move around so much. So we stayed at APU for almost 7 years before I took the head coaching job at Southeastern University out in Florida. And so we went from APU to Florida, and now we came on back to California.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's but that's the reality of it. And
Right.
that's the one thing, with the Walk On Warrior podcast, we try to be as real as possible and really kind of just get into the nuts and bolts of it, because I think young student athletes and parents don't understand the perspective of coaches and where coaches are coming from. And obviously, we're going to talk about recruiting, but it's important that you lay that foundation when it comes to a coach. I think a lot of times we look at it as a parent and a player. We just want what's best for our player and whatever, which is fine. That's what you want. But at the same time, you also have to look at it from another aspect, right? And if you're doing something right, there's obviously something right, something wrong. So I think getting to know the coaches and what the coaches are all about. Because if you know what the coaches are looking for, then obviously things are going to be more successful for you.
Right.
And and also, if you want to get into coaching, it's definitely a grind, but it's definitely it's something that can bless you down the road and bless anybody that's around you, student athletes and stuff.
Right. Had a good conversation with one of the guys that I used to coach with, and we talked a lot about this is a purpose. You got to find your purpose. Finding your purpose in coaching is really the motivation for what you do. Because if you're not purposed to coach, if you're not purposed to be a teacher or mentor and give, it's going to be a real tough road, not just for the coach himself or herself, but also for the players.
Yeah. So let's talk about, a young student athlete has decided, hey, I'm going to go, and this is my dream to play at the next level. But guess what? I'm not getting all the looks and all the Twitter posts of blessed to receive, whatever, like all my buddies are getting. Mm-hmm. So I'm a junior. I'm going into my senior year. From a coach's perspective, let's talk about how could a student athlete position themselves to get the eye or the attention of Coach Cesar Rivas?
I think when you're all sitting around the table to get the eye, there's a couple things that need to happen. For one is you mentioned earlier the perspective of the coach, right? When that film first gets dropped on somebody's lap, you want to see the film the player jump off the screen. Like, wow, first 3 to a dozen clips, you just want it to pop. Like, wow, this kid can play. Athletic. There's some tangibles in there that you just want to see. You're looking for foot speed, and you're looking for size, and you're looking for all kinds of different things from a tangible standpoint. Is the kid fast for the position? Do they have, like I said, quick feet? Do they look like they can change direction? Are their body control? If they're a big lineman, are they powerful? Are they striking? Are they using their hands? Or do they have a great motor? You're looking at all those tangible things that jumping off the screen. Are they making plays? And that's explosiveness. That's what you're kind of looking for when it jumps off the screen. And again, there's all these different requisites, but for the families to understand that if you're a linebacker and you're setting linebacker film and you want to be recruited as a linebacker, there's these certain tangible things that coaches are all looking for a linebacker: offensive lineman, defensive lineman, quarterback. And that's the first indicator. But even before that, to even put on the film, sometimes you got to, unless you're a 5-star guy, and you're talking about walk-on specifically, they're going to take a look at those transcripts, because they're coaches like myself. You're sitting around a table when you're trying to fly a player that's looking for a roster spot. After the initial geographic recruiter, after that initial coach like myself watches the film and goes, okay, I'm interested, I'm intrigued, let me go show the staff now. And you sit around that big staff table with, a dozen other coaches or more. Sometimes it could be up to 20 sometimes. There has to be other requisites, and the academics is one of them. There's going to be background checks, character references, checking your social media. There's going to be all of those other things. We used to call them, you have to be a low maintenance guy. We don't want to spend a lot of our time, energy, and effort, resources in making sure that you're going to do the right thing if you're on our team. And so, yes, being a great player is one thing, having athletic ability, a certain skill set to play your position. But if you're a high maintenance player and you're a walk-on, you're not even on scholarship, there's no way we're going to spend that time, energy, and effort on somebody like that.
That is a huge point, man. That in itself is everything, because you're already somewhat behind the 8 ball. I don't want to phrase it like that, as a walk-on.
Yeah, it is. It's reality.
But for sure. And so you need to come in above and beyond with everything dialed in, even with the right mindset coming into it. And I think a lot of kids, especially nowadays with the short attention spans and the flash and everything of that nature, I think it's key that kids understand that, okay, so the coaches have already dialed in, whether it's their first signing date, second signing date, they got everything locked and ready to go. They only have a couple spots, and they're looking to fill that with somebody that can maybe come in and make an impact on the team in some capacity. It's just, and it's a little bit longer road. I mean, for me, I tell kids all the time, I held pads for 3 years. But before I was able to even have that shot on the team, I had to come in the springtime and make an impact. It could be one opportunity, maybe 2 opportunities, but you have to be ready to rock at all times. And you're talking about drama. I use the word drama. You're talking maintenance. But if you don't have good academics, they'll never talk to you again. You're not even coming back. It's just the chopping block now. And
there's too many recruits out there. There's just it's a numbers game. It's just a math equation now. There's so many young men that are playing high school football that have access to being better players. And so the skill set for guys, my last year, I graduated high school in 1995. So my freshman year, I was a redshirt freshman at Davis. I couldn't play now there. I wouldn't make the team. That I just the level of player there now is just outstanding. And going across the board, I was at the Division II level for a long time too, and I was a former Division II guy. The Division II level of athletes are just far higher than they used to be as well, just because there's far higher number of qualified athletic athletes out there that are just, their skill sets at a higher level. There's just so much more training. They're drinking more milk. I don't know what it is, but there's sports specific now training. There's all this other stuff, the football IQ huddle. I mean, you name it, just the development of players is at a higher level. And so the competition is higher. So there's not any more football playing institutions. If anything, like we'll use California, for example, there's far fewer football and playing institutions, but there's more players. Then you throw in the portal and transfers and all this other stuff, and it's a math equation. There's just not enough opportunities, whether it be scholarship opportunities or walk-on opportunities, roster spots, for as many qualified student athletes that are out there. And so you have to be overly prepared for that opportunity when you have it, whether it's a piece of paper and a transcript or running a 40. I mean, you have to be prepared for that.
Yeah. So now it comes to the point for me when I either talk to a coach at my high school, say they come in there recruiting some of the players, or whatever, because a lot of times a coach will show up and they'll be recruiting a kid, but then all of a sudden they run into somebody else and they say, whoa, wait a second here. Or they're watching a film. We're talking about film, those first 3 clips. Coach Cesar Rivas, you could be looking at a quarterback and then all of a sudden you're like, holy smokes, this offensive lineman is a monster. This guy, we don't have his name down. So now you got an opportunity to where now you're talking to this guy. And even if the coach had already come to the high school and try to recruit that quarterback. Oh, my fault. I got you. Did I got you?
Yeah, there you go. I lost you there for a second.
Oh, okay. No, you're good.
Okay.
What I was saying is, and you're talking about positioning yourself as a student athlete. We talk about highlights, but within your highlight film, the first 3 to 5 seconds or 3 to 5 clips, it's got to be dialed in, because on top of that, I always mention to kids too, is I say, well, in those 3 to 5 clips, you could also remember that within that, you could be a receiver and a quarterback that they're recruiting is thrown into a receiver, or an offensive lineman. I find players just as much or as many times as, just looking at film and I see somebody else. I'm like, oh my God, 6'3", 280. He's what the heck?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've lost track of how many times, we're watching a quarterback and we're like, who's the dude he's throwing the ball to? Or man, who's the left guard like that, or the center or the right tackle? That guy's a dude. And that's we just do that. Or you're watching a receiver and the receiver's balling, but then you're like, man, who's that corner that he's going against? That guy's a freak too. Wow, that kid's impressive. He's jumping off the screen. Let's go find him. Let's go do some background research on that guy. But if I go backwards a little bit, when we go on campus and we run into another player maybe that we weren't originally looking at, having that student athlete be prepared for those impromptu meetings, those impromptu run-ins are huge. From how you're presenting yourself to how you're shaking hands to the conversation, and you're looking the coach in the eye, you're intrigued and you're engaged. You're being an active listener. You have answers to their questions. I think that's the one thing for me, when there's kind of a young man that's kind of on the borderline, you're not quite sure. I might have a roster spot. I might have even an extra scholarship. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do here. The young man that is prepared for those meetings, for those impromptu run-ins, those are the ones that really stick out. So when you go back to campus and you're talking to your staff, you're like, hey, I ran into this kid. He was amazing over at XYZ, high school. Let's throw on his film. I was really, really impressed with him. I want to get your guys' take on this kid.
What a great point that is, because first impressions, I always talk about first impressions. And what I did when I showed up at Utah State, obviously I was persistent, but I made sure that when I walked in there that they knew I meant business, because obviously at the Division I level, it really doesn't matter, but you're walking in there and making that first impression. And if you have coaches have such a short attention. We talk about kids having short attention spans.
Right.
Coaches have short attention spans as well. And unfortunately, it's kind of fortunate, but unfortunate at the same time, that we kind of put kids in a box, right? So quarterback needs to be 6'3", whatever. O-lineman is whatever. So if you walk in there and say you are an undersized guy, you need to make a first impression immediately to say, hey, boom, I'm here to stay. I want to be on the team, whatever it is. And then on top of that, you can also add in the fact that when you show up, say they do let you on the team in practice, coming out here and making it happen in practice right now. A lot of kids, especially scholarship kids, they hate those guys. But that was me. And that was, the coach knew my name. There's no question about it. Because when I came on to practice or whatever, coach knew who I was because of the positive things, right? The hustling, the hard work, the whatever, asking questions, whatever. And a lot of times guys end up getting a scholarship or opportunities beyond that because of that. So, and that's the first impression. So we're talking about highlights. Okay. Highlights is a big thing. Is there anything else that a student athlete, let's say that they're putting their portfolio together? And I think one thing that you mentioned, I know you'll probably talk about this, but so you've got your highlights, boom, it's headed towards Coach Rivas. What are some other extremely important things, say top 3 things that you are, say in a portfolio for a kid, right? You got a highlight film. What are some other things that
great question. I'm actually going to sum it all up into you alluded to it earlier. Coaches have short attention spans too, right? Not only do we have short attention spans, but we also, our time is very valuable because there's just so many kids to evaluate, right? So if a student athlete can make it one-stop shopping for us to where we don't have to keep calling back and asking for more information and more information. So the one thing that I encourage young men to do now is say, hey, put it all in one email. Put your huddle film, your highlight film. Put the link. Make sure that your huddle film isn't private. Oh, the worst thing in the world is to get a kid that you're interested in, type it on in, plug it on in the link, and then it's set to private, and you got to call the coach or call the kid and try to get it, so you can actually watch the film. But that's one. But also including the test scores, the transcripts, any pertinent information, your NCAA ID number, the links to your social media handles, all of that in one-stop shopping. So there's not just 3. I would just say throwing all of that information into one email, one link. Let's say if you have a digital resume, let's call it, that you're sending on out, all of that stuff together. So that way the coaches have all those questions answered, because they're going to ask you for all that stuff anyway. Hey, can I see your transcript? They watch the film, they like the film. The first thing they're going to do is, can I see the transcripts? They might even ask for the depending on which college you're speaking to, they might actually ask for the transcripts before they even watch the film.
Yeah.
And then contact information of your coaches and or any other important people that are involved in your life that a college coach might want to ask questions to and inquire more about.
That's a real good. That last one is such an important point, because when I would recruit kids, I would typically use Twitter, and I'll tell you why. Because every kid has a Twitter and every coach has a Twitter. I'm telling, and so if your profile, if I have to message you and wait and I want it now. Like I want to when I'm looking up guys, I want your information and I want to contact you now. I don't want to message you on Twitter, because that can take forever. And you know how it is, like, well, they're busy, whatever. Give me your number. Give me something that's going to go directly to either you or it's going to go to a parent. Because if I'm a coach and I want you bad enough, I'm calling mom and dad while they're at work to bug them to get me information. I don't mean to be disrespectful.
And every recruiter is a little different. Some coaches like to make phone calls. Some of them like to text first. Some of them, they'll slide into the DMs. They'll call the high school. Some coaches like to call the high school coach first, get a little background on the kid. So there's every recruiter is a little bit different on how they like to go about their process. I think in totality, by the time they're getting you onto the team and you make the team, whether it be through scholarship or walk on, you're on the roster, I think they end up encompassing all of those things. They hit all those points eventually, but everybody's process is just a little bit different, right? But the thing is, you want it to be one-stop shopping. So no matter what coach is calling you from or trying to get a hold of you for any institution, that all of that pertinent information is there. So that way, if you send 500 emails to 500 different institutions at all the different levels, Division I, Division II, Division III, that all those coaches have access to all that information about you to contact you and do background on you.
I think there's a lot of mess. That's the word that comes to my mind. I think a lot of times with young kids and with parents, obviously they're confused. They're not sure what to do. What should I do, coach? Should I do this? Should I do that? I'm not in the or business. I'm in the and business. Right? Do this and this. Mm-hmm. Add this and add this.
Yes, sir.
However, you do want to dial it in the right. You don't want to have too much, because I think there can be too much. I don't think you should have just one thing or whatever, but you want to make sure that you have just enough to where a coach, at least it piques their interest. It says, Coach Rivas, this is what I got. I promise you, you're going to like it. Boom, that first impression. Okay, well, we're dialing in your buddy Johnny, the quarterback. When I come back, this is who I want to talk to. And I think that goes for anything too. I think that whether you're trying to get a job or, meeting, and from a guy's perspective, meeting a girl, whatever, I think that that's important, that first impression, and having all that dialed in as best as you can. That's kind of a funny way to put it, but but moving forward with that. Okay. So let's say the first signing day is gone and all your buddies, there's kids committing, there's a lot of blessed to receive online. You're getting nervous. You're not sure what to do next. What happens next? So we're in spring, right? So what from a coach's perspective, you guys haven't completely filled up your entire class, right? At this point,
right.
Roster, there's still availability. Talk about what's next. You cut players, there's open spots. How does that work for a kid like me that's undersized, whatever, says, hey, you know what? I'm done. It's over. What happens next?
I think there's two sides. I think from a player and the family side, it's don't panic. I think let's start there. Don't panic there. From a coach's perspective, the coaches are always reevaluating their roster. That's just what great programs do. They're always reevaluating their roster. Now, for some programs, realistically, they're going to be full. They're going to keep 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 roster spots, maybe scholarship spots, maybe 1 walk-on spot by a specific position. But they're going to, for the most part, they're telling everybody we're full. And that's realistic. That happens. And so families just have to kind of move on from there. But you're right. There is this constant evaluation through winter mat drills and winter strength and conditioning. There's players that might drop off. And especially now with the portal, there's kids that'll transfer and realize, like, this isn't the right place for me. I don't want to say I didn't like it, but just, this isn't the right place for me. Coaches are coming in and having those dialogues with players. Hey, this might not be the right place for you. Especially on turnovers on staffs, with all the new turnovers on staffs and new coaching staffs, there's all this constant reconfiguring of the roster all the time. Then you go through spring football. Then again, reevaluation, depth charts change. Players are happy, players are unhappy. Coaches are happy with certain players, they're unhappy with certain other players. Academics start to come into a factor. Certain guys might not be eligible, so they lose their position on the team. The conversations, the post-spring meetings, the one-on-one meetings with players after spring ball is over, those real-life conversations like, hey, Johnny, you're the third-string quarterback, and that's where you're going to be going into fall. And Johnny has a totally different evaluation of himself, and he goes, no, I think I should be the starter, so I'm going to go put myself in the portal. So now all of a sudden, there's not 3 quarterbacks, there's 2, or there's not 5, there's 4. And so now that kid leaves, and so now there's an opportunity in late spring, and we're looking at like April, May time of the year that these roster spots now come open. So even a school that said, or a program before that said, hey, we're full, now all of a sudden they have maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, or 10 roster positions open at different various positions that they didn't think they were going to have open, let's say in December. So that's kind of how this all changes and evolves, and it's so organic. It's always flowing. This is why I always encourage recruits to create great relationships with coaches, whether or not they say they're full, whether or not they say you don't have an option here anymore. Thank you very much. Thanks, but no thanks, basically. It's okay. You always never burn a bridge. You always keep a great positive relationship. Always have a great positive relationship with your high school coach, because the high school coach is also someone that's going to call on your behalf in the spring, in the late spring, or he's entertaining college coaches coming in looking for the next recruiting class and saying, hey, like right now is a great example. We're in March, and technically 2024 class is probably done at most places around the country. But when coaches go back on the road and start doing spring recruiting in May for 2025-26, now all of a sudden they're coming in and saying, hey, Coach Z, do you have a guy? We actually lost an offensive lineman. I know you had an O lineman on your roster. Did he sign anywhere? Did he go anywhere? Or hey, 2 years ago, I knew you had a DB. Didn't he go to a junior college or something like that? Is he still sitting around? We really liked him a year or two ago. What's his availability like? And so those conversations really happen at the midnight hour, we'll say, and even in late spring recruiting for what should be a year or two later. But really, they're now because of the transfer portal and things like that, positions open up, roster spots open up in late spring.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. And if we're talking to a senior, so we get into May, okay, so we get to that late situation for a senior, and okay, so there may be a spot open, there may not be a spot. Let's say a coach just says, you know what, boom, we're out. We don't have anything left. Right. What is the student athlete? Because really, it's getting a kid to believe mentally that there's always something open. There's always something available, right? So you've set everything up, your junior, senior years, your highlights, all that kind of stuff. So now we're moving through spring. You got your exit meetings. Some kids are getting cut. Some kids aren't. Here's who's coming in, who's not. So a young student athlete hasn't heard from Coach Rivas or Coach whoever. He wants to go play at Laverne or wherever. So now what? So now what happens? So there's not an availability. So what are the options does a kid have? Does a kid say, well, okay, so I'm going to come to Laverne, right? You're at Laverne currently, right?
Yeah, I'm the deputy AD over here. Yep.
That's right. Okay. Sorry. Shout out to Laverne. So does a kid say, okay, I'm going to come and walk on, or do I go JUCO? Right.
Well, I know you just had a young man on your podcast recently. What was his name again? Giles, right?
Oh, Jagger. Yeah.
Yeah. So Jagger, yes. I remember Jagger when he was a player at Helix High School, and he played for my good buddy Robbie Owens, and we were looking at him actually, and we didn't go on, but he ended up going to a JUCO. He went to Grossmont, if I'm not mistaken, and he blew up over at Grossmont. He was like Defensive Player of the Year, if I'm not mistaken. He had an amazing junior college career, and then he ended up at Idaho State as a scholarship player, if I'm not mistaken. Correct?
Yep. Shout out Jagger.
So I will actually, because I remember him. I remember him specifically because that was on their state championship year. He was number 10, if I'm not mistaken. And he was a really, really solid player for them. But I was coaching in Florida, and we had a couple scholarships available. We ended up going with one transfer and 2 high school kids that were local. And so we stayed in state. We stayed in our backyard. So I didn't scholarship a high school kid out of the state of California to play linebacker and fly across the whole country and bring him over there. So I was really looking more for transfers, junior college players at the time. And it didn't mean that Jagger wasn't a great player. He had amazing grades. He was a great high school player. But he just fell kind of in between the cracks, if I remember correctly. And so he went to Grossmont. And I think that would be the next opportunity for families to understand is that that's not the end all be all of, okay, I didn't get a Division I scholarship. I didn't even get a Division II scholarship. What do I do? I think junior colleges are opportunities, walk on at all the other levels. And then now Division III schools, universities are options as well, depending on what your academic interests are and what your academic goals are. If your goal is to play college football and to get an education, then there's a lot of different opportunities to go out there and get that. If your goal is, no, I need to be a Division I or Division II, Division, we'll say Division I, your FBS, your FCS, and then in your Division II, your scholarship institutions, and even in NAI, you can get scholarships. If it's, well, I've got to go get a full ride, well, then the only other real opportunity for you then is to go to junior college. Go junior college, play for a year or two, see if you can get yourself out of the junior college and notice to get great film to have that opportunity a year or 2 years later down the road. That's really what you're looking for. But I wouldn't knock even small college football. Small college football was, as I was a coach at that level, I'm an athletic director now at a small college. I think there's so much great football at all the different levels. And I think that the smaller college levels sometimes get a little bit of a bad rap for, oh, well, anybody can play though. No, not really. Because again, there's only so many opportunities. There are only so many roster spots. There's only about 7% of high school football players that actually go on to play college football, and only 1% of them actually get scholarships.
That's a real great point. And when I grew up in Oregon, Southern Oregon, man, in the early 2000s, were winning national championships left and right, and would come to your house. Forget about home games. They would come to your house, and it would be, 2 feet of snow at Carroll, and they would stomp you out and get back on the bus and come home. And there is some really, and also you get a lot of kids that end up, say, bouncing around from a Division I or whatever, end up coming back. So you're going to have some really good talent coming out of those lower levels. And even at the NFL, they're starting to really touch on some smaller schools. And I had a shout out Kevin Boss. He was at Western Oregon, and good, friend of mine. I wouldn't say good friend, but friend of mine, ended up going all the way to playing in the league. He showed up at Western Oregon, and I'm going to talk about development here in a second, but he showed up at 6'3", ends up leaving at 6'5", put that time, and he was 180, ended up being about 240. Now he's going to the combine. It just development. Kids don't understand that, number one, you got to be patient. That's a key word that I always tell kids, to be patient in the recruiting process. But if it doesn't work out the way you want it to work out, there's still opportunities. And you got to be patient. You have to be patient. You got to learn the art of one of the most important words in the English language when you're a kid, and that's the word no, right? You're going to have to just take a step back and be like, whoa, wait a minute. I don't actually know everything, because the culture now is everybody has to go D1, but kids don't know what D1 is. They don't even know what next level at the university level is. I don't care what level you're at. Right. So it's like, how about this? Take a step back, learn about the process, learn about all those levels, learn about setting yourself up for success, and then let the chips fall where they may. Build relationships, get your culture right, understand what the culture is, go to a camp. Dude, I even tell kids, you know what? If you know somebody already on campus, go up there, go sit on a sideline, do whatever. A lot of coaches, if you're a decent recruit or anything like that, coaches are cool with that. I mean, it's what are you stealing secrets or say? It's like nobody cares.
I haven't seen any kids getting kicked out of practices for watching if they're actually a high school or junior college recruit.
Yeah. And also in coaches and stuff like that. It's like, I don't understand why, if you don't want to, build relationships and go get access, because the more access, and we talked this before we got going on the podcast, but the knowledge and understanding of what goes on, because in some of my other podcasts, with some of the kids, I always love the kids' perspective. We're going to talk about it with you in a minute, but from the moment they get on campus to what happens, like, tell me what goes on campus from, start of, give me your best day, 6 a.m. workouts, classes, film, all that stuff, because kids say, I want to go D1, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But what does that actually mean? Right.
Well, let me add to that. When I talked about it's a math equation, right? I think there's perspective in educating families now of what does D1 really mean? What is FBS, FCS? What is group of 5? Well, now group of 4. What is, there's Power 5, which is now Power 4. There's group of 5. Then there's FCS, Division 2, NAI, Division 3, and then JUCO, right? So what does all that mean from a number standpoint? Oh, well, I want to play at this level. Well, when I do this presentation now with Iron Athletics and being an administrator now and pivoting roles, is that I try to educate families and saying there's 85 scholarship at the Division I level. There's a misnomer that FCS is the same as FBS. It's not. So Division I FBS is 85 scholarships, full ride scholarships. You're either a full ride scholarship football player or you're a 100% walk on. There are no partial scholarships at all the FBS schools. Then you drop down to the FCS schools. There's 63 scholarships, or what they call equivalencies, at those schools. And that's the Idaho States, the UC Davis now, the Sac States of the world, Cal Polys, Villanovas. You have Richmonds, Tennessee Chattanoogas of the world, that you have Tennessee States. Those are your 63 equivalencies. Now, you can break those scholarships up to where some guys are full ride scholarship guys, some guys are partial scholarship guys, and you can break that up over 80 to 80. I think it's still 80, if I'm not mistaken. It might be up to 85 now, but 80 used to be 80. You can break that up to 80 scholarship players, and then the rest of your roster are walk-ons. Then you go to the Division II level, and you can have 36 scholarships. Now we're talking about total these colleges, and there's only about 140 or so Division II schools. There's the low 100s in Division I, and then FCS is like 133, something like that. It's something marginal. It's not even 200 colleges, not even 150 Division I colleges, scholarship schools out there. And so for families to really understand, it comes down to a numbers game of how many student athletes have an opportunity to earn a scholarship, because you have to remember, there might be 85 scholarships at USC, but there's not 85 new scholarships at USC. They're keeping the majority of that roster rolling over from year to year. So there might be 25. And now with the portal, guys jumping in the portal, there might be 30 or 35 scholarships a year that are turning over at USC, Alabama, University of Washington, Oregon. Those are the big time schools. And then when you're looking at FCS, they only have 63 to give out. There might be even less of that from that standpoint. And then at the Division II level, you might be giving out more scholarships, but the money's less. NAI is 24 equivalencies. And then obviously Division III, there are no scholarships in Division III. It's all 100% academic and financial aid. So I think really educating families of how competitive it is to have that dollar amount, to get those dollars, is really important to grasp that. It's not dire. It's not to make anybody, oh gosh, my career's over, kind of, woe is me. Yeah. You don't need that type of mentality. You do need to push on through that, but just understanding perspective and what reality is out there and how competitive it is. And that's why it's important. I tell young men to have 3 non-negotiables, and it's really important for them and their family to say, I have to have these 3 things. These are non-negotiables in my college experience. This is what I need to have in making that jump from high school to college, in whether it be academic, social, geography, athletic, doesn't matter. But they have to have some non-negotiables, and that'll really whittle it down to a list of, these are the places that I'm really interested in, and these are are these places really interested in me? And then so that it goes from here and gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller over time. But nobody wants to go to a place that they're not in love with. I think that's the other one. I think a lot of guys will make that mistake. Hence the reason for the transfer portal nowadays being so big and such high volume in the transfer portal, is that young men make decisions over money or the opportunity to make money or earn a scholarship, instead of just finding a great home, and they end up changing their mind quite a few times through the process.
So when a young student athlete and parent, or both, right? Say a coach comes to a high school and he's recruiting you, or he's recruiting your buddy and he meets you, whatever, or you're on a recruiting visit as a parent and a player, what would be the most important questions to ask Coach Rivas so that we both are on the same playing field to really get to know as much as we can in just those 3 questions, as much as you can, either about you, coach, or about the process, or about my school? What are the things that, if I was a parent and I asked you these questions, what would you want me to ask you? Like, I want to know about your school. What are the most important things?
Well, I think everybody, if you're a walk-on and you're not getting money, I think the first, it's reprioritizing yourself. Is it academics and then athletics and then your social life and what you're getting from your network at that institution? Or is it athletic first? Oh no, I want an opportunity to earn a scholarship. I think it varies from family to family. If the family's going into it, and again, I'm not one to tell a family what their priorities should be. That's between them and their family. So First off, they need to set priorities, and everybody's a little bit different. So I think the questions that that's kind of like peeling an onion there. It really depends, I think, is the right answer. It really depends on what the priorities are of the family. I know a lot of families that walk in and say, Johnny can't go to a 4-year school unless he earns a scholarship. We've saved up enough money to send him to college for a year. He's got to earn a scholarship within a year, or else he's coming home. Johnny's coming home. Now, in those types of settings, I've had that real conversation as a head coach at 2 different institutions before with families that come in with that type of mentality. And I say, if Johnny's going to come on in and walk on, 1 year isn't enough time. It just won't be. He's going to spend the first year. We're going to evaluate his talent on the scout team. This is per average. Are those outliers that walk in 1 year and they're on scholarship by year 2? Sure. But you never want to overpromise and underdeliver as a coach. And so you'll tell them that's probably unrealistic to expect that he'll be on scholarship, be able to earn a scholarship going into his second year. The first year, he's probably going to be on the scout. Not probably. He'll be on the scout team. And he's going to be learning the process. He's going to go to class and learning the offense and defense. He's going to be on special team scout. This is what he's going to do. He's going to then try to be competitive by spring. And then he might have an opportunity to maybe compete that next fall. And then based on that, in that second spring, we're talking going into his 3rd year in college, he might have an opportunity to earn a scholarship. And those were real conversations. And I had to have that conversation with many, 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 many families of saying, the timeline is distorted a little bit here. And so if you're expecting that, I want to be truthful and honest with you on the front end. Now, not every college coach says that because everybody wants to give everybody hope, because there are those outliers. There's that one-off that can do it, that will do it, that has done it. And we want to give them hope and faith in themselves that they can. But the reality of it, that's tough. So then we kind of reconfigure that conversation of the questions like, okay, can Johnny graduate in 4 years? If he decides to stay and he graduates in 4 years and he redshirts that first year, can he go to grad school? Do you reevaluate the walk-ons every year? Do you dismiss walk-ons from year to year? Does he have to retry out basically every fall, every spring, or every summer? There's those questions. What's the integrity of the coaching staff to keep Johnny on the team if he fulfills his obligations of being a great student, being a great teammate? He's working his tail off. He's always on time, never late, does all these other things. Can he keep his roster spot, or are you reevaluating him with a better walk-on next year and he can lose his opportunity for a roster spot? Is that realistic? So just those are the types of questions you want to start asking. The other one is also, you alluded to this before. You said, I think you were a walk-on at Utah State and you came in the summer, right?
I came in the spring.
In the spring. Okay. So there's different types of walk-ons now. So there's walk-ons where you come in fall camp with everybody else. There's walk-ons that come in when school starts. And then there's walk-ons that you get an opportunity by doing the mass tryout like you did. And you have an opportunity to walk on in spring. And so you kind of understand your value a little bit based on the type of the year that the coaching staff brings you in as even a walk-on. And what's the opportunity? You also want to know how many other young men are in your room. If you're a linebacker like Coach Z was, Coach Z, you were a linebacker, right? Or safety?
I was a running back.
You were a running back. Oh, okay. You were built like a freaking linebacker. Okay, so I wasn't too far off. But how many other running backs are in the room? How many other scholarship running backs are in the room? How many other walk-on running backs are in the room? Do you project? Because you want to know, do I really have a shot? Am I one of 14? And only, and there's only four or five running backs on scholarship, or you know what, the room's a little smaller. There's a lot of turnover. Graduated 2 seniors at that position. It's a really young group. It's going to be really open audition in the spring and in the fall for who's playing and who makes this team. I think those are really important questions to ask. But again, you're going to college with the idea, hopefully the goal specifically as a walk-on, that you want to graduate with a degree. And so the academic component is really, really important in making sure that your son or you as a player, that you're going to be resourced appropriately to be given the roadmap to success for graduation.
So before we get into a student athlete being in Coach Rivas's program, I got one more thing I want to ask you. And what if you're recruiting a kid, what is one thing that could completely say, boom, doors shut, I'm not talking to that kid anymore, I can't, forget it? what is one thing? Well, I don't have to say one thing, but what is something that could really say, I'm out of here?
I think it's just disinterest. That's the one thing for me that just shows you that the young man it's just not the right place for him. If he's sitting around and there's just not they're not overly engaged and they're showing some disinterest. Now there's introverts and it's okay with being introverted. You don't have to be this, spokesperson on your visit and be chatty Cathy. You don't have to do that. But definitely eye contact, definitely showing that you're engaged, that you're enjoying where you're at. And again, part of that could be us as a coaching staff. If we're not doing a great job in the recruiting process and the kid is showing disinterest, then that's our fault as the coaches too. So there's plenty of times where you go, you know what, we messed that up. We probably we goofed up right here. We didn't do a good job recruiting this kid. He's not interested in us, and this is our fault. So as much as it is, I'm saying on the kid, it's us. But at the end of the day, the result is still the result. If the kid's not interested, you just don't want to keep pounding on that door trying to make the kid interested in you. You've either done a really great job and the kid's not interested, or you did a very poor job recruiting him. The kid's not interested. Either way, the kid's not interested at that point. You never want to, just no different than trying to make a kid on your team, trying to convince him to stay on your team when they think they want to transfer, trying to convince a kid that's really not interested that he needs to be interested in your program. I have some definite strong feelings about that. I know some coaches would disagree, and there are some details to that of at the very beginning process of working your tail off as a college recruiter to sell your program and give all kinds of great, valuable information that hopefully the young man is interested. But again, if they're doing it the right way and they have their non-negotiables, if they have some non-negotiables and your program and your institution doesn't fit them, then it's okay to let them go.
Yeah. And it's interesting because coming from a coach's perspective, you have to have you have to wear a whole bunch of hats. I mean, because you have to be able to judge a kid's character, and it's hard because they're kids, right? I mean, you're trying to judge a 18, 19-year-old kid and who they're going to project to be in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years as well. Because there's so much of the unknown of the development that goes through with kids. And it's such a wild time. And, coming from a coach, because you're an adult, you got kids, you got all, and then you're dealing with kids and you think, well, I've got kids, I can figure it out. But you're dealing with 100 different personalities, dude. And you're like, because I don't have kids, but people ask me, you have kids? I'm like, yeah, I got 100 of them over here on this roster. Right. And they all are different. They all have different backgrounds. And we're looking to put this thing together in a short amount of time and move forward, right? The way that I feel as a coach is in the right direction, right? The right direction with morals, values, and all that. But let's segue into a student athlete is now in your program. Okay. So a student athlete is in your program, whether it's year 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Okay.
Coach, talk about, you've already had the speech. You've already told these kids this is what this program is all about. You've already laid out the foundation. What makes a really good, whether it's teammate, whether it's good just student athlete, what makes a really good player in your program or any program for that matter at the next level?
Well, I think we use this word all the time. We throw it around very casually, the fit, right? What's a great fit? I think that's what you're trying to allude to. What's a great fit for the program? And I was actually challenged by one of my staffs at one point in time because I used to use that word a lot. Like, what do you mean, coach, by fit? Because we're recruiting kids from all over the place. Like you said, all these different backgrounds, so much diversity. Some are coming from 2-parent households. Some are coming from single family. Some are coming from none, no family. They're, wards of the state and they have no support system at all. Private schools to terrible public schools and everywhere in between. Right. old or younger. And I think what it comes into is you have to really set a mission and vision of the program. You have to have core values for your program. And then something that I always said was, does the young man, is he willing to grow and develop in our core values? So we have to know who we are first as a program. Then we go, does this young man, is he willing to grow and develop in these 4 core areas? We're not asking him to be a finished product. What we are asking him is that he can fall in line with trying to grow and develop in these core areas of what we find valuable for our program. If the young man can say yes to that, and we can ascertain from doing all the background checks and everything else of the young man that he is willing to grow and develop in our fundamental core values, then the answer is yeah, he's a great fit. Not a finished product, because that's where coaching comes in. I think I heard Mike Tomlin say, some coaches just don't like to coach anymore. And that's the development part of young men. The development part of just the youth is so important to what we do, that when they walk into our program, I think a lot of times nowadays we want them to be finished products, and in both from an athletic standpoint, but also from a young man standpoint. I think that's just unrealistic. And so we need to find out, in their core, are they good human beings? Okay, cool. We can work with that. And then you just keep growing and developing them till they're, walking out the door, walk across that stage, they're getting their degree, and you go, man, that young man is amazing. His journey, look at the growth, look at the development, the finished product. And that's, for me, what we're looking for in our student athletes. And so for us, whether it be the academics, the social component, the athletic component, for us, depending on what institution I was coaching at, the faith component was important. Being at a place like Southeastern University or being at a place like Azusa Pacific, the faith component was important to the institution. So that had to fall in line, because again, it wasn't a good fit. If a kid didn't want to go to chapel, and you're going to APU and you got to go to chapel, or you're going to Southeastern, you have to show up to chapel X amount of times a week, then that's not a good fit. It's not going to be a good place for the young man to develop in that area. So, but if I'm at, UT Martin, where, we don't have that requirement. So you can take that faith component of the core values out of it, because that isn't really, it's not a requisite to go to school there. Or, if you're, it doesn't matter, but you kind of understand what I mean by that. And that's really, I think, for the young men to understand. The sticking point is, and I kind of alludes maybe to your previous question of, if there's a family sitting in front of us, what should they be asking? I think a lot of those questions are, who are you as a head coach? Who are you as the coordinator? You as the position coach? What do you stand for as your program? What does your program stand for? And does my son fit into those core values?
Well, and you're being transparent. I mean, that's such a huge thing, because you got to be able to communicate. 4 years, 5 years, that's a long time. And there's a lot of things that go on from a kid when he starts out at 18 to where he becomes 21 or whatever it is. And, there's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of things that go on there's more distractions to pull you away from being successful than just that one positive thing that keeps you moving every single day, moving forward. With the campus life, and now you're an adult. Okay. Listen, student athletes, parents, you're watching, student athletes specifically, you're an adult now, you're 18. Now you got to go talk to the counselors. If you fail the class, you're doing bad in the class, you need to get scheduled, got to get your butt up. I mean, it's as simple as those little things, but everybody overlooks that. Me being at Utah, it's cold outside. Dude, I don't want to get out of bed and go, it's freezing. Right? Little stuff like that. That's super important to take into account. He's got a girlfriend now. Whoops. Now that's distraction that's getting in the way. Right. So if all of a sudden now you've been given this opportunity to go do something at the university level and go pursue, for some of these, we're talking about 15 million homes are single parent homes. So now you may be the first in your family to pursue going and getting a 4-year degree. Listen, don't get in a situation where you have all these distractions that get in the way, right? It's okay you got to have a social life. You got to be on campus doing social things, off campus doing social things. But I think it's important that you stay focused on what you're trying to move forward in. And it's hard to be successful as a student athlete. And you're like this with a coach, right? It's like a coach wants you to be successful, but you have to be able to be vulnerable enough and be humble enough and all these different things to actually want to be moving forward with that. But when you have coaches that are trying to be transparent and tell you exactly like it is, sometimes you got to just take a step back, shut the door, and be like, you know what, coach, you're right. Because if I could go back right now, and you would probably say the same thing, if you could go back right now and be a player again, there's a lot of things you'll change.
My
a
goodness.
lot of it has to, and a lot of it has to do with just, you know, closing your mouth and just listening and saying, okay, he said, you know, lift this, or, you know, add an assignment, or do the extra credit, or I don't know, get rid of the girlfriend. I always bring that up.
Right.
That's always a major.
But to kind of come back to your question of what do we need? I think there's certain just human characteristics like high character, loyalty, being trustworthy, great work ethic, relentless work ethic. Those are characteristics that'll help a walk-on, I think, really flourish no matter what the environment would be. Coach, do you think I think we lost you again?
Oh, I lost you again. I'm sorry, buddy.
That's
probably
okay.
My Wi-Fi. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. You were saying?
No, I was just saying that, you know, those are the characteristics of being somebody with integrity, high character, relentless work ethic, loyal, you know, trustworthy. Those are intangibles that any you want all your players, not just walk-ons. Of course, as a walk-on, it's going to give you the best opportunity to get to your goals, but any player on your team as a coach, that's what we want. We want, because we understand that we're not all finished products. We're going to all have a deficit in something. You know, for some of our student athletes, they're not going to be great students, but we want to know that they're going to work extremely hard in the classroom and allow us to coach them to be better students. Some of them, they're not going to run fast enough or be big enough or lift as much as we want them to when they first walk in the door, but will they work hard to get better in all those areas? You know, it's kind of like coaching quarterbacks a little bit. I kind of make the parallels that I'm working with a couple quarterbacks right now, and some of them have just really fundamental skill set at the position. And what really is really cool about, though, they all are really hungry to learn. So I know 6 months from now, every single one of them is going to be better. So you go, okay, I can work with that. That's every single one of these guys is going to be so much better 6 months from now because they're going to put in the work to get better. And that's really what you want as part of your program.
What would you say, if you could sum it up to just one thing, would make a student athlete? What's the number one success trait in a kid? What would you say that would make them successful? What is something about a student athlete at the next level that they have to be successful?
A relentless work ethic. They have to have a relentless work ethic in all phases of their life. It's who they are. It's got to be in their DNA. And that relentless work ethic, gosh, and it's like 1A, 1B, and just got to be just a good human being. I mean, that just, you'd be so surprised with being just a genuine good human being, how far that will get you in life and in your process, because there's going to be some really rough days and you're going to need more than just you. I've never met one successful college football player, coach, human being on this planet that hasn't needed some other people along the way. And being a really great human being helps out so much in that process. And so I think they really, if it's 1A, 1B, or, you know, it's really important to be both of those things. It's hard to separate them.
What would you say would be the number one thing that would make a student athlete fail at being successful?
Complacency. The not realizing, the failure to realize that you need to continue to grow and develop and thinking you've arrived. I think the great ones always have that innate ability to want to get better. and the ones that you go, man, that guy was pretty good. Whatever happened to that guy? It usually had something to do with it. There was just they hit a point of complacency in their life.
Yeah. So from a coach's perspective, talk about, so say a kid has never been on a campus before. He just committed, or he's getting ready to be a part of your program. What would be, kind of give a rundown of what a practice looks like?
Well, just a typical practice in the fall would be, I mean, usually you're going to start meetings in the early afternoon. They get out of class, you go to meetings in the early afternoon, and then after the meetings go, then you're following up with just going to the training room, getting taped, and then you're out on the football field. Once you're out on the football field, typical practices, early outs, warm-ups, some special teams, segments, usually doing, again, depending on the program, special teams tends to run some sort of circuit, usually at the beginning. You have pre-practice drills, everyday drills by your position, some player-led stuff while coaches are getting out. People doing stuff about half speed, quarter speed, just to kind of review and get ready for practice. Some align assign stuff, and then practice gets rolling. Everybody, you have team stretch, and then you're going indie, you're going group work, you're doing your crossover, 7-on-7 scale, inside run. You're working your pods, O-line, D-line type stuff. And then you have your team segments where you're trying to get after it. Sometimes it's 9-on-8, sometimes it's 11-on-11. It depends on the day of the week, but usually Tuesdays, Wednesdays are your heavier 11-on-11, and your Thursdays are kind of clean it up days where you're going versus scouts and scout cards on both sides of the ball. And usually you're done with your conditioning stuff by Wednesday, usually. Depending on who your head coach is.
The dreaded conditioning. That's
And then everybody wants to be, up on the science now. So some teams are helmets on Thursdays, some teams are going full pads on Fridays, and I think it just depends on what the philosophy is of the head coach and their strength and conditioning coaches and their athletic training staffs on rest and recovery and what that looks like. And everybody's real big on the science stuff now, and there's so many different opinions about it. So that's also a question that people can ask about the potential program.
Yeah. Kids getting complacent. I think that's one thing that, especially kids that are considered a 5-star, 4-star, whatever, and they got a bunch of coaches that are all over them. They get to these programs, and me being a JC guy, we end up getting contacted by a ton of guys. And a lot of those guys typically are those guys. They end up going somewhere, and then they just assume that they're going to play right away. And I would say there's probably some coaches that do say, hey, we're going to bring you in, we're going to play you right away. And then the false promises, things like that. And that does happen. Getting complacent. And then, on top of that, when they bounce back, they end up being a terrible teammate at the JC level. And then they completely sabotage themselves. And so that stuff happens all the time, man. It just drives me crazy. Listen, I want a couple more questions before we get you out of here, because I know you got to run. So give me your number one success story of a kid that came to you at any school you have ever been at. That talk about that. Talk about a success story of a kid that maybe was under recruited and he got that opportunity and he was able to put it together. Something that just jumps off.
Gosh, there's so many of them. I'll be really honest. There's so many of them throughout the years of success stories, and that's so hard to narrow it down.
I bring that up because a lot of times those success stories, there's always there's clues that can be left from that, whether it's a hard work or it's an overcomer or it's somebody that was just persistent. Like for me, for example, I go to Utah State, the coaching staff, they're at year 4. I walk in there and I said, hey, I want to play football for you guys. They say, okay, cool. We got to walk on try it in the spring. Into the season, go figure. I'm sitting here training. I'm ready to go. I'm locked in. All of a sudden, boom, the staff gets fired. Right. So the situation, you're in a situation where all of a sudden now the whole staff gets fired. I go in and talk to the same coach. He said, there's nothing I can do at this point. We're fired. And so now I don't know what to do. And so now here comes the new staff, and then I do the same process again, and then I get in the tryout and so on. And I always tell this story that all of a sudden spring practice starts. Now you got a whole new staff. They want to set a precedent. This whole team, we're going to be tougher, all this stuff. All 6 of the running backs get hurt. Z, who else do we have? I'm the last running back here. Nobody really knows me. All of a sudden I get that opportunity. First play, we run the ball, go figure. 20 yards down the field, come back, let's do it again, 20 yards down the field. Anyway, I bring that up because I think that a success story like that happens all the time. And I think that it's all about being relatable and those stories that really take it to the next level. So
absolutely. I think that, if we're just talking football, it's a kind of a real quick but funny story is that I took over at University of Nebraska Kearney back in 2006, coaching D-line, and they had come off a pretty decent season the year before. Defensively, they were giving up some points, so we had to go in there and kind of clean up the defense a little bit. But they had quite a bit of success. But there was 2 incumbents, 2 senior defensive ends that were, hey, these are going to be your guys, coach. These are going to be your guys. And one of them was just so pretty looking, and the other one was really, both of them were pretty looking, just totally different guys. One was a transfer from COD, actually, and he was a preseason All-American. And then another guy was this like 6'6", just ginormous kid playing defensive end, and he was a senior. And I remember going through the camp and having a kid by the name of Nate Reichs. He was a sophomore at that time, from down the street in Nebraska, some small little town called McCook. And for us, we're from the city, we're from California, so everything out there is probably a little smaller than what we're used to. But he was like a wrestler. Dad was in the military, just really tough-nosed kid. But to say he was maybe 6'1" at the time was a stretch. And he wasn't overly athletic. He was kind of stiff. But the kid just kept showing up and showing up and showing up. And I remember I put him in, I put my starting lineup in, and I remember the head coach kind of looking at me crazy at one point in time going, whoa. He's starting today? And it was for like the first game of the season. And I said, yeah, he's earned it. Like, the kid's going to be amazing. And he was a sophomore, redshirt sophomore. And I was starting him over a senior. A senior was still going to play, don't get me wrong, but this kid was going to play. And he just turned into an absolute stud. And he then started for the next 2 years, and then I left. I left to UT Martin the senior year, and he played for a buddy of mine, and he ended up breaking the school record for sacks. And I just remember that was like a really cool. If we're just talking about an athletic success story, that was a really cool moment of a young man that just was so relentless in his work ethic, his leadership skills, his ability to lead others. It was just, he was just unwavering. It was amazing. And so that was a really cool success story. There's so many academic life success stories along the way as well. Young men, I just look at the last program I was at Southeastern University, a young man that came from absolutely nothing. And he had, maybe half a dozen brothers and sisters all living under the same roof, and go and pick him up one day out of his house. And there's, eviction notices, plastered to the windows. And that's why I'm not even going to say his name right here, because I wouldn't want to embarrass him. But, there's bullet holes in the front door, and, just single mom and just a really, really rough upbringing. Kids from Tampa Bay, and everybody kind of thinks of Tampa as being this really, Orlando and Tampa being these just, vacation destinations, but there's some really rough areas of of those cities. And the young man was on the verge of just flunking out of school. And he slowly but surely started to figure it out every single semester, just got a little bit better, and then a little bit better, and then a little bit better. And then he just recently, if I'm not mistaken, is halfway done with his master's now. Went back to school as a grad student, took that 5th year option, his COVID year, didn't transfer, and he's wrapping up his master's. And I was just like, what an amazing success story! What an amazing success story! And so there's so many of those ones out there. There's probably more of those than even the athletic ones. And those are the ones I really hold on to really tight, is growing young men up to being men and being great members of society and great fathers and great husbands and great sons, and just being amazing men. Those success stories are really awesome.
Yeah. All right. Before I get you out of here, I got to put you on the hot seat.
Okay.
I got to ask you some questions here. So question number one, we're going to talk Mexican food. So, and this, you got to be careful.
It makes somebody mad. I know. I'm going to have to pick a place in LA. I can't pick a place in San Diego or Chula Vista specifically. I already know this.
So, who has better Mexican food, or what city has better Mexican food, LA or San Diego?
San Diego.
No question.
Yeah, San Diego. Absolutely. Chula Vista. Absolutely. Everything close to the border. Yeah. The closer you get to the border, the better the Mexican food.
Question number two, what is your number one pet peeve when it comes to student athletes?
Oh, jeez. Entitlement.
Yeah.
Yep. Entitlement.
Yeah. And then question number three, what's your number one most fulfilling thing about being a coach or coaching student athletes?
Like I said, I think I just alluded to it, just doing life with them, getting to know them, getting to know their families, seeing the success stories of life. Football is cool, and winning is amazing, never gets old. Winning championships is great. Getting rings, amazing. Making money, doing something that you love is amazing. But really, it's the relationships and being able to. There's a young man in that picture in the background that you have there from APU that I'm actually going to be doing his premarital counseling, and he asked me to officiate his wedding this summer. So one of my old players, and so those types of stories, that's the special part. That really is.
Oh, you're ordained.
I know. Apparently, I have to go get it. I have to go get it ordained. I've got about 6 months to figure it out. He asked. I told him I would do everything I possibly could to figure out how to do it.
Man, there's another good one about Coach Rivas. And final question. I was debating whether to ask you this or not, but from a coach's perspective, I think of it from so question number 4. What is your favorite discipline technique? Rolling, having kids roll, or having them do stadiums?
Okay, I'm going to give you one physical and one non-physical. I think rolling is miserable, and kids can run for days, but when you ask them to roll, it's like you took part of their heart out of their chest when they hear you say, "Hey, start at the goal line and just start rolling." Yeah, there's something about that they just absolutely despise, and it actually saves their legs. So I do think that's kind of a little bit better of a physical discipline. But nowadays, again, depending on what place you're at, whether or not you can get away with doing stuff like that anymore. The other one is this. When it comes to academic discipline, I've actually put a table out on the practice field and had young men sit down on the practice field at a table doing their homework, writing papers, doing stuff, and watched practice while all their teammates watched them do their work. So
that's great.
I can get really creative. I got a lot of those where that comes from too.
And one last question. I guess I said that was going to be the last one, but last question would be, Coach, if you could go back and talk to yourself at 18 coming through this process, what would be the one thing that you would really hammer home now, knowing what you know as a player and as a coach?
That it's okay to win all the time. Don't be apologetic for it. And that there's no ceiling on hard work.
Yeah.
There isn't. Just be a relentless hard worker. Don't get complacent. Continue to push. It's okay to win all the time. I think that's what I would have told my younger self.
Yeah. No, that's good. All right, Coach. Listen, is there anything you wanted to plug? I know you got Iron Athletics. Iron Athletics training and consulting. Is there anything you wanted to plug before we get out of here?
No, I appreciate the opportunity, Coach Z. I think that with Iron Athletics, what we're trying to do, obviously, I've been a coach for 23 years, and I just dove into the administrative side of things to keep my family back in Southern California and around our community. But what we're trying to do with Iron Athletics is just really educate families. So there's a real major component. I came home and I got requested a lot for personal training and can you coach quarterbacks? Can you coach linebackers? Can you do all this stuff? And I don't do as much of that. What I really enjoy is doing the leadership development with coaches, both high school coaches, JUCO coaches, and also some four-year college coaches. But the other one is just educating families on the recruiting thing, kind of like what you're doing right now. So I have a 6-module training webinar that will take 6 different days, whether it's 6 days in a row, 6 weeks, or 6 months. And I just take families through the process on what recruiting really looks like and answering all the questions from what do I do first and how do I put my highlight film together to what is an NIL and what does signing day look like. So there's all of that stuff that kind of goes into what we do at Iron Athletics.
That's awesome. And I want to chat with you a little bit when we get off here in a second. But listen, guys, hey, Walk On Warrior podcast, super excited. We got a lot of great guests coming on. This is episode 7. We've had a lot of really, really good information, insight, and most importantly, wisdom, from those that have done it, whether they're coaches, players. We've got some mental folks coming on, mental training and all that kind of stuff. So we really want to make sure and give a real holistic and comprehensive system here at Walk On Warrior. So listen, like, share, subscribe us, man. Also reach out to Coach Rivas. We'll definitely tag all of his information. If you guys have any questions on anything, he'll definitely be more than happy to mentor you and put you in a situation to be the most successful. And I always like to end it this way. I always like to say here at the Walk On Warrior podcast, it's not about us. It's about you guys. See you guys in the next episode.